It's been over 50 years since Eugene Cernan took humanity's last steps on the lunar surface, and here's the shocking truth that space agencies don't want you to hear. The reasons we haven't returned have almost nothing to do with technology. The Apollo 17 lunar module lifts off from the Taurus Littrow Valley, carrying the last humans to walk on another world. Cernan's final words from the surface were prophetic. "We leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind." But that return never happened, not in the next decade, not in the next century, and despite all our technological advances, perhaps never at all. The Apollo program cost $25.4 billion in 1973 money. That's over $280 billion in today's dollars. At its peak, it employed 400,000 people and consumed nearly 3% of the federal budget. NASA was burning through money faster than rocket fuel, and Congress was watching. By Apollo 11, public support was already waning. A poll taken just weeks after Armstrong's giant leap showed that 56% of Americans thought the money could be better spent elsewhere. But money alone doesn't explain our absence. We spend far more on military programs that never see combat. The real issue runs deeper. It's about sustained political will across multiple administrations, something democracy struggles with when projects span decades. The moon doesn't vote. It doesn't lobby Congress. It doesn't threaten national security or promise immediate economic returns. In the brutal calculus of political priorities, lunar exploration loses every time. The technical challenges we faced then remain largely unsolved today. The lunar regolith, that fine, razor-sharp dust that covers everything, isn't just annoying, it's potentially lethal. Harrison Schmitt, the only scientist astronaut to walk on the moon, developed what he called lunar hay fever from breathing traces of the dust. It's so abrasive it wore through the outer layers of spacesuits. It's electrostatically charged, clinging to everything, and it contains microscopic glass beads formed by ancient meteorite impacts that can shred lung tissue. We still don't have a perfect solution for dealing with this omnipresent hazard. Then there's radiation, the silent killer that didn't make headlines during Apollo because those missions were short and lucky. Beyond Earth's protective magnetosphere, cosmic rays and solar particles bombard everything. The Apollo astronauts saw flashes of light with their eyes closed, cosmic rays striking their retinas. They absorbed radiation doses that would be unacceptable by today's safety standards. A solar flare during any of those missions could have been catastrophic. We rolled the dice and won, but that's not a strategy for sustainable exploration. The Van Allen radiation belts, those donut-shaped zones of charged particles trapped by Earth's magnetic field, present another challenge. Apollo missions punched through them quickly, minimizing exposure. But modern spacecraft with more sensitive electronics and longer mission profiles face greater risks. The radiation can flip bits in computer memory, cause cascading system failures, and gradually degrade solar panels and sensors. It's like flying through an invisible minefield where the mines don't explode. They just slowly poison everything. Consider the sheer audacity of what Apollo accomplished with 1960s technology. The Apollo guidance computer had less processing power than a modern car key fob. They navigated using sextants and slide rules. The lunar module was so fragile that astronauts could push their fingers through its walls. It was brilliantly designed for its single purpose, but impossibly inadequate for anything more ambitious. We went to the moon in a tin can wrapped in gold foil, guided by computers weaker than your microwave. Modern safety standards make Apollo's Cowboy approach impossible. NASA's current human rating requirements demand multiple redundancies, extensive testing, and failure probabilities calculated to the 9th decimal place. The agency that once embraced calculated risks now operates under the crushing weight of perfect safety. an impossible standard that paralyzes progress. Every component must be certified, every procedure documented, every contingency planned. The paperwork alone for a modern moon mission would weigh more than the lunar module. The geopolitical landscape has shifted dramatically since Apollo. The Cold War provided clear motivation: beat the Soviets or risk ideological defeat. That existential competition justified enormous risks and expenditures. Today's space race with China lacks the same urgency. When China landed Chang'e 4 on the lunar far side in 2019, a historic first, American media barely noticed. The public yawns at achievements that would have dominated headlines in the 60s. But perhaps the most profound barrier is psychological. Apollo was never really about the moon, it was about us. It was humanity's coming-of-age moment, proof that we could transcend our earthly cradle. Once proven, that psychological need was satisfied. We'd metaphorically moved out of our parents' house. We didn't need to keep doing it to prove we could. The moon became been there, done that, yesterday's news in a culture obsessed with the next big thing. The International Space Station orbits at 408 kilometers above Earth, barely higher than the distance from New York to Washington, D.C. The moon sits 384,000 kilometers away, nearly 1,000 times farther. This vast gulf represents more than distance. It's a chasm of complexity that grows exponentially with every kilometer. The ISS can be resupplied every few months, evacuated in hours during emergencies, and constantly monitored from ground control. The moon offers none of these safety nets. If you're enjoying this deep dive into cosmic mysteries, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up, because what I'm about to reveal challenges everything you thought you knew about our relationship with the moon. When something breaks on the ISS, and things break constantly in space, spare parts arrive on the next cargo ship. When Scott Kelly's spacewalk went wrong in 2015, Mission Control talked him through repairs in real time. On the moon, you're looking at a 3-second communication delay, spare parts that are 250,000 miles away, and no possibility of rapid evacuation. Every Apollo mission carried a suicide pill protocol, though NASA never publicly acknowledged it. If the ascent engine failed, if they couldn't leave the surface, there were procedures in place for the inevitable. The economic reality of lunar missions has only gotten worse since Apollo. SpaceX, despite revolutionizing launch costs, still charges about $2,700 per kilogram to low Earth orbit. Getting that same kilogram to the moon multiplies the cost by factors that make accountants weep. Every bottle of water, every meal, every spare bolt becomes a financial decision worth more than most people's annual salary. The business case for lunar return collapses under the weight of these numbers. Private companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX promise to change this equation, but their timelines keep slipping. Elon Musk's predictions for lunar missions have shifted from 2018 to 2024 and beyond. Jeff Bezos speaks eloquently about lunar settlements, but struggles to even reach orbit. The gap between billionaire dreams and physics remains stubbornly wide. Money alone can't solve problems that require generational commitment and institutional knowledge that was lost when Apollo ended. Here's something NASA doesn't advertise: we've forgotten how to go to the moon. Not the basic physics, those equations are eternal, but the institutional knowledge, the thousands of small tricks and techniques that made Apollo work, died with the engineers who created them. The tooling was destroyed, the production lines dismantled, the suppliers went out of business. We'd literally have to reinvent much of Apollo from scratch, and modern environmental and safety regulations would make many of their solutions illegal today. The F1 engines that powered Saturn V were marvels of controlled chaos, generating 7.6 million pounds of thrust by burning kerosene and liquid oxygen in a carefully managed explosion. Modern engineers studying recovered F1 engines discovered manufacturing techniques we can't replicate. The combustion instability problems were solved through trial and error, creating baffles and injector patterns that worked for reasons we still don't fully understand. The craftsmen who hand-welded those engines took their expertise to their graves. China's lunar ambitions represent a different challenge to Western assumptions about space exploration. Their Chang'e program methodically achieves milestones, orbital missions, landers, rovers, sample returns. They're following Apollo's playbook, but with patience measured in decades, not years. When Chang'e 5 returned lunar samples in 2020, it marked the first sample return in 44 years. Yet this achievement generated less public excitement than a new iPhone release. The cultural momentum that drove Apollo has dissipated. The Artemis program, NASA's current attempt to return, reveals the institutional paralysis gripping space exploration. Originally targeting 2024 for a crewed landing, it's now pushed to 2026 at the earliest, though insiders whisper about 2030 or beyond. The Space Launch System, derisively called the Senate Launch System for its political rather than technical design, priorities, costs $2 billion per launch. It uses space shuttle engines from the 1970s because that's what Congress mandated. We're going backward to go forward, trapped in a cycle of political compromise that would have killed Apollo in its cradle. International cooperation, touted as the future of space exploration, creates its own barriers. The Artemis Accords, signed by over 30 nations, establish principles for lunar exploration. But principles aren't hardware. Coordinating between NASA, ESA, JAXA, and other agencies adds layers of complexity that Apollo never faced. Every decision becomes a diplomatic negotiation. Technical standards must accommodate different measurement systems, safety philosophies, and political sensitivities. The Tower of Babel has nothing on trying to coordinate a multinational lunar mission. The discovery of water ice at the lunar poles, confirmed by multiple missions including NASA's L-Cross impact in 2009, should have triggered a new rush to the moon. Water means rocket fuel, drinking water, oxygen to breathe, the foundation of sustained presence. Yet this game-changing discovery produced more scientific papers than funded missions. We know exactly where to find lunar resources but lack the will to claim them. The psychological impact of Apollo on NASA created a success trap. How do you follow the greatest achievement in human history? Every subsequent program gets compared to Apollo and found wanting. The space shuttle was sold as routine access to space, but killed 14 astronauts. The ISS was pitched as a stepping stone to Mars, but became an end in itself. NASA exists in Apollo's shadow, unable to recapture that lightning in a bottle because the bottle was a unique moment in history that can't be recreated. Risk tolerance has fundamentally shifted since the 60s. Apollo 1 killed 3 astronauts in a launchpad fire. NASA learned, adapted, and flew again within 21 months. After Columbia broke apart in 2003, the shuttle program never psychologically recovered. We've become a society that demands perfect safety in an endeavor that's inherently dangerous. This isn't wrong, human life has value, but it makes bold exploration nearly impossible. You can't explore the unknown without accepting unknowable risks. The environmental movement, largely born after Apollo, raises uncomfortable questions about lunar exploitation. Should we strip mine the moon for helium-3? Do we have the right to contaminate another world with our presence? These ethical considerations didn't trouble Apollo planners but now generate lengthy environmental impact studies. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits national appropriation of celestial bodies, creating legal uncertainty about resource extraction that lawyers will debate for decades. The attention economy has transformed since Apollo. In 1969, there were 3 television networks. When Apollo 11 landed, the entire world watched the same grainy footage simultaneously. Today, that landing would compete with millions of other content streams. TikTok videos of cats would get more views than humanity's return to the moon. We've gained infinite entertainment options but lost our capacity for collective focus on grand achievements. The medical data from Apollo astronauts reveals disturbing trends that NASA rarely discusses publicly. Heart disease killed a disproportionate number of lunar astronauts compared to those who only flew in low Earth orbit. James Irwin suffered multiple heart attacks starting just months after his moonwalk. The deep space radiation environment appears to damage cardiovascular systems in ways we're only beginning to understand. Sending more people to the moon means accepting that we're potentially shortening their lives by decades. Recent studies on the Apollo astronauts' health, published in Nature in 2016, found that those who traveled beyond Earth's magnetosphere died from cardiovascular disease at rates 4 to 5 times higher than astronauts who stayed in low Earth orbit. The radiation exposure from just a week on the moon caused lasting damage to their blood vessels. Imagine what months or years of lunar residence would do to human physiology. We're not just exploring space, we're conducting involuntary experiments on human biology. The lunar samples returned by Apollo continue to surprise scientists 50 years later. In 2020, NASA opened a vacuum-sealed sample that had been preserved since Apollo 17. They discovered that lunar soil contains reactive compounds that could damage DNA, previously undetected amino acids, and evidence of solar-wind interactions going back billions of years. Every new analysis reveals how little we understood about what we were dealing with. The moon isn't just another destination, it's an alien environment more hostile than we imagined. Here's a truth that aerospace contractors don't want publicly discussed. The corruption and waste in space programs makes lunar return financially impossible. The Space Launch System has consumed over $40 billion and counting, with each launch costing more than the entire budget of some NASA science missions. Boeing charged NASA $900 million for a service module that SpaceX could build for a fraction of the cost. The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about has metastasized into the space-industrial complex, turning lunar ambitions into corporate welfare programs. The Columbia disaster investigation revealed a culture of normalized deviance at NASA, the gradual acceptance of lower safety standards through repetition without consequence. This same culture persists today, hidden behind PowerPoint presentations and risk matrices. Engineers raise concerns that get buried in bureaucracy. Managers make decisions based on political pressure rather than physics. The very institutional culture needed for safe lunar missions has been corroded by decades of compromise. Planetary protection protocols add another layer of impossibility. We now know that Earth bacteria can survive in space far longer than expected. Tardigrades, those microscopic water bears, survived exposure to the vacuum of space on the ISS. If life exists or existed on the moon, and recent evidence suggests it might, we risk contaminating it with Earth organisms. Every lunar mission must now undergo extensive sterilization procedures that add millions to mission costs and months to preparation time. The discovery of lunar lava tubes through orbital imaging should have revolutionized our approach to lunar habitation. These natural caverns, some large enough to house entire cities, offer protection from radiation and micrometeorite impacts. Yet we lack the technology to safely explore them. Sending humans into unexplored caves on Earth is dangerous enough. Doing it in spacesuits on the moon borders on suicidal. The infrastructure needed to make these natural shelters usable would require decades of robotic preparation we haven't even started. Let me share something that rarely makes headlines. The lunar communications infrastructure from Apollo no longer exists. The deep space network that enabled mission control to talk to astronauts was partially dismantled, repurposed, or allowed to decay. Rebuilding this network with modern capabilities would cost billions and take years. We can't just point an antenna at the moon and start talking. We need an entire ecosystem of ground stations, relay satellites, and backup systems that no one wants to pay for. The nuclear option, literally using nuclear rockets for lunar missions, died with the Nerva program in 1973. These engines could have doubled or tripled the efficiency of chemical rockets, making lunar missions far more practical. But the political impossibility of launching nuclear materials, the environmental concerns, and the international treaties against nuclear weapons in space killed this technology. We chose safety over capability, Earth over space, fear over exploration. Russia's experience with lunar missions tells a cautionary tale. Their lunar program achieved multiple firsts: first impact, first soft landing, first lunar orbit. Yet their planned crewed lunar program collapsed not from technical failure but from institutional decay. The N-1 rocket, their answer to Saturn V, failed 4 times before cancellation. The Soviet space program fragmented after the Cold War, its expertise scattered across multiple countries. If a superpower at the height of its technological prowess couldn't sustain a lunar program, what hope do fractured modern democracies have? The educational pipeline for aerospace engineers has shifted dramatically since Apollo. In the 60s, the best minds in America worked on space exploration. Today, those minds go to Silicon Valley, Wall Street, or biotech. The average age of NASA engineers during Apollo was 28. Today, it's approaching 50. We're not training the next generation of lunar explorers because young engineers see no future in government space programs. They'd rather design apps than spacecraft. Climate change has reordered global priorities in ways that make lunar ambitions seem obscene. How do you justify spending hundreds of billions to put bootprints on the moon when coastal cities are drowning? When droughts threaten food security for billions? When the Amazon rainforest approaches its tipping point? The moral argument for space exploration weakens with every wildfire, every hurricane, every climate refugee. Earth's crisis makes the moon's exploration feel like Nero fiddling while Rome burns. The rare Earth elements needed for modern spacecraft, neodymium for magnets, europium for displays, yttrium for lasers, come primarily from China, which controls 97% of global production. Any serious lunar program requires Chinese cooperation or massive investment in alternative supply chains. The geopolitical reality is that we've handed control of space exploration's critical materials to our primary competitor. The moon might be American in memory, but its future belongs to whoever controls these elements. Public health crises like COVID-19 revealed how quickly priorities shift when survival is at stake. The pandemic's cost, trillions globally, dwarfs Apollo's budget, yet that money went to economic survival, not exploration. Future pandemics, increasingly likely as climate change and habitat destruction accelerate, will continue to drain resources from optional endeavors like space exploration. The moon becomes a luxury we can't afford when we're fighting for survival on Earth. The emergence of virtual reality and digital experiences offers a disturbing alternative to actual exploration. Why risk lives and treasure sending humans to the moon when we can create increasingly realistic simulations? The next generation might prefer exploring photorealistic lunar landscapes from their couches rather than supporting actual missions. As the line between real and virtual blurs, the argument for physical presence weakens. We might have already entered the age where exploration happens in silicon, not space. The militarization of space presents an unspoken barrier to lunar return that defense officials understand but rarely articulate publicly. The moon's strategic value as the ultimate high ground hasn't escaped military planners. China's demonstration of anti-satellite weapons, Russia's suspected orbital weapons platforms, and America's Space Force establishment signal a new reality, the Moon could become a military asset. No nation wants to enable another's lunar military presence, creating a strategic paralysis where everyone watches but nobody moves. Consider the implications of a Chinese military base on the Moon. From there, they could monitor every satellite, track every launch, potentially even deploy kinetic weapons that would arrive at Earth with devastating force. The Outer Space Treaty prohibits weapons of mass destruction in space, but conventional weapons remain legal. This ambiguity creates a strategic nightmare where the first nation to establish lunar military capability gains insurmountable advantage. The result? Nations block each other's lunar ambitions through diplomatic and economic means, rather than risk military imbalance. The aging population in developed nations shifts economic priorities away from long-term projects like lunar exploration. Japan, facing demographic collapse, can barely maintain its existing infrastructure, let alone fund ambitious space programs. Europe grapples with pension crises that dwarf space budgets. America's Social Security and Medicare obligations grow by trillions while NASA's budget remains flat. Young populations drive exploration, aging populations demand healthcare. Demographics are destiny, and our destiny is earthbound. Artificial intelligence's rapid advancement paradoxically reduces the need for human space exploration. Why send fragile humans when increasingly sophisticated robots can do the job better, cheaper, and without life support? The Mars rovers have demonstrated remarkable longevity and capability. China's Yutu-2 rover has explored more of the lunar far side than any human could safely traverse. As AI improves, the argument for human presence weakens. We're approaching a point where robots will be our permanent proxies in space. The legal frameworks governing lunar activity remain deliberately vague, creating paralysis through uncertainty. Who owns lunar resources? Can a company claim a crater? What happens if two nations claim territories overlap? The Moon Treaty, attempting to declare the Moon the common heritage of mankind, was rejected by every spacefaring nation. Without clear property rights, no company will invest billions in lunar infrastructure. We've created a legal void that makes commercial lunar development impossible. Here's what the space tourism industry doesn't want you to understand. The billionaire space race is actually delaying serious lunar exploration. Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic sell 10-minute joyrides to the edge of space, creating an illusion of progress while contributing nothing to deep space capability. These vanity projects consume resources, talent, and public attention that could support actual lunar missions. We're amusing the ultra-wealthy instead of advancing humanity's reach. The psychological phenomenon known as overview effect, the profound shift in awareness astronauts experience seeing Earth from space, might actually work against lunar return. Apollo astronauts returned with a deep appreciation for Earth's fragility and uniqueness. They became environmentalists, humanitarians, advocates for global cooperation. This transformation suggests that space exploration's greatest value might be teaching us to cherish Earth, not escape it. The Moon's greatest gift was showing us that Earth is our only viable home. Nuclear war remains humanity's sword of Damocles, and it directly impacts lunar ambitions. Any major conflict between nuclear powers would end space exploration for generations. The electromagnetic pulse from nuclear detonations would destroy satellites, creating a cascade of debris that makes orbit impassable, Kessler syndrome on steroids. The resources needed for post-war reconstruction would eliminate space budgets entirely. We're one miscalculation away from losing access to space permanently. The discovery of potentially habitable exoplanets has shifted our cosmic perspective in unexpected ways. Why struggle to survive on the barren Moon when Earth-like worlds orbit distant stars? Projects like Breakthrough Starshot propose sending tiny probes to Proxima Centauri within this century. The moon increasingly looks like a pointless detour rather than a stepping stone. Our imagination has leapt past the moon to worlds that might harbor life, making lunar exploration feel antiquated. Cultural attitudes toward risk and sacrifice have fundamentally changed since Apollo. The 60s test pilots who became astronauts came from a military culture that accepted death as an occupational hazard. Today's astronauts are scientists and engineers, valuable for their knowledge, not their willingness to die. Social media would turn any lunar mission death into a global trauma with real-time footage and endless analysis. One dead astronaut today might end human spaceflight entirely, a risk no politician will accept. The economic theory of opportunity cost devastates lunar ambitions when honestly applied. Every dollar spent on lunar missions could instead fund thousands of teachers, medical research, renewable energy, or poverty alleviation. The moral mathematics become crushing. How many lives could be saved with Apollo's budget? How many problems solved? The moon offers abstract benefits, inspiration, technology development, national pride. Earth's problems offer concrete suffering that demands immediate attention. Space debris represents a growing threat that makes even leaving Earth increasingly dangerous. With over 100 million pieces of debris larger than a millimeter orbiting Earth, every launch risks triggering a collision cascade. The Chinese anti-satellite test in 2007 created thousands of trackable fragments that will threaten spacecraft for decades. Before we can safely travel to the moon, we need to clean up the orbital environment, a task that could consume the entire space budget for generations. The energy requirements for lunar missions clash directly with climate commitments. A single Saturn-filled launch released as much carbon as a small city produces in a year. Modern rockets, while more efficient, still represent massive carbon expenditures for marginal benefit. How do nations committed to carbon neutrality justify lunar missions? The cognitive dissonance between fighting climate change and burning massive amounts of fuel for space exploration creates political paralysis. Biotechnology's revolution suggests that humanity's future lies inward, not outward. Gene editing, life extension, consciousness uploading — these technologies promise to transform human existence more profoundly than any lunar base. Why adapt humans to space when we can engineer ourselves for immortality on Earth? The billions required for lunar missions could instead fund research that eliminates aging, disease, and perhaps death itself. The moon is geography, biotechnology is transcendence. The insurance industry's risk models make lunar missions financially impossible for private companies. No insurer will cover human lunar missions at premiums companies can afford. The liability for astronaut death, mission failure, or environmental damage exceeds any potential profit. Government missions can self-insure, but private lunar ambitions die in actuarial tables. Space exploration's privatization, supposedly the path to affordable access, founders on the mathematics of risk. The quantum computing revolution reveals a disturbing truth about our technological priorities. While we pour billions into developing computers that operate at the edge of physics, the basic life support systems needed for lunar survival remain largely unchanged since Apollo. We can simulate the universe at the quantum level, but can't reliably produce water from lunar regolith. This disconnect between our advanced capabilities and basic survival technology creates a barrier that grows wider each year. Recent declassified documents from the Apollo era reveal how close we came to disaster on every mission. Apollo 11's computer overloaded during descent, forcing Armstrong to land manually with seconds of fuel remaining. Apollo 12 was struck by lightning during launch, temporarily knocking out critical systems. Apollo 13's explosion is well known, but fewer people realize that Apollo 16's engine nearly exploded in lunar orbit. We succeeded through luck as much as skill, and luck isn't a sustainable strategy for lunar return. The microbiome revolution in medicine adds another layer of complexity to lunar missions. We now understand that humans aren't individuals but walking ecosystems hosting trillions of bacteria essential for digestion, immunity, and even mental health. The sterile environment of spacecraft and lunar habitats could devastate these microbial communities. Astronauts on long missions report digestive problems, weakened immunity, and psychological changes potentially linked to microbiome disruption. We might be biologically incapable of thriving in the moon's sterility. Here's what the nuclear power industry doesn't advertise: the radioisotope thermoelectric generators that powered Apollo's lunar experiments came from a nuclear weapons infrastructure that no longer exists. The plutonium-238 needed for space nuclear power isn't produced commercially. NASA's current supply would barely power a single lunar mission. Restarting production requires weapons-grade nuclear facilities that violate non-proliferation treaties. The moon's exploration is held hostage by nuclear disarmament. The rise of authoritarian governments worldwide threatens international space cooperation. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shattered decades of partnership on the ISS. China's human rights violations make cooperation politically toxic in democracies. The European Space Agency fractures along national lines as populist governments prioritize domestic spending. The international collaboration needed for sustainable lunar presence becomes impossible when nations view each other as enemies rather than partners. Cryptocurrency and blockchain technology have absorbed many of the brilliant minds who might have worked on space exploration. The promise of quick wealth through digital speculation attracts talent that once dreamed of the stars. Universities report aerospace engineering enrollment declining, while computer science programs overflow. We're training a generation to mine digital coins instead of lunar resources, to build virtual worlds instead of exploring real ones. The psychological concept of shifting baseline syndrome explains why each generation accepts diminished expectations for space exploration. Those who lived through Apollo expect lunar bases by now. Generation X settled for the space shuttle. Millennials consider the ISS an achievement. Generation Z might view suborbital tourism as the pinnacle of human spaceflight. Each generation's reduced expectations become the next generation's normal, creating a downward spiral of ambition. Water scarcity on Earth makes the moon's ice reserves a source of potential conflict rather than cooperation. As aquifers deplete and glaciers melt, the idea of mining lunar water for Earth becomes simultaneously more attractive and more contentious. Who has the right to extract water from the moon when billions lack clean drinking water on Earth? The ethical frameworks for resource extraction that we can't resolve on Earth become impossibly complex when applied to the moon. The emergence of deepfakes and digital manipulation erodes the trust necessary for public support of lunar missions. In an era where any video can be faked, how do you prove astronauts actually reached the moon? Conspiracy theories about Apollo being filmed on a soundstage would explode in today's environment. The authentication infrastructure needed to verify lunar missions might cost more than the missions themselves. We've entered an age where seeing isn't believing, making grand achievements impossible to validate. Fusion Power's eternal 20 years away status mirrors lunar exploration's perpetual postponement. Both represent technologies we understand theoretically but can't implement practically. The joke that fusion is always 20 years in the future applies equally to lunar return. These parallel failures suggest a deeper inability to execute long-term technological projects in modern democratic societies. We've become experts at promising the future while failing to deliver it. The gig economy's rise reflects cultural changes incompatible with lunar exploration. Apollo required hundreds of thousands of people dedicating careers to a single goal. Today's workers expect to change jobs every few years, pursuing personal fulfillment over institutional loyalty. The deep expertise needed for lunar missions requires decades of specialized experience. How do you build that expertise when your engineers leave for startups after 2 years? The cultural infrastructure for grand projects has evaporated. Antibiotic resistance threatens to make lunar missions medically impossible. In the closed environment of a spacecraft or lunar base, a resistant infection could kill an entire crew. The overuse of antibiotics on Earth is creating superbugs that no medicine can treat. Sending humans to the moon means accepting that a simple infection could become a death sentence. The medical technology racing to stay ahead of evolution might lose that race before we're ready for lunar return. The collapse of science journalism means lunar missions would struggle to maintain public support. Apollo benefited from Walter Cronkite explaining each mission to millions. Today's fragmented media landscape offers no equivalent unified voice. Complex missions get reduced to tweets, nuanced achievements become clickbait, and failures get amplified while successes are ignored. Without effective science communication, public support for expensive lunar programs becomes impossible to sustain. Virtual reality's improvement trajectory suggests that simulated lunar experiences might satisfy humanity's exploration urge without actual missions. As haptic feedback improves and neural interfaces develop, the distinction between real and virtual exploration blurs. Why risk death on the real moon when a perfect simulation offers the same experience? This technological escape hatch lets us abandon difficult reality for comfortable illusion, making actual lunar return psychologically unnecessary. The rise of universal basic income discussions reflects economic realities that preclude lunar investment. As automation eliminates jobs and inequality soars, governments face pressure to provide basic sustenance to millions. The political impossibility of funding lunar missions while citizens struggle for basic needs becomes insurmountable. Space exploration becomes a luxury that democracies facing economic disruption simply cannot afford. The moon loses to the mortgage every time. The terraforming dreams that once justified lunar bases have collided with biological reality. Recent experiments with closed biospheres reveal the impossibility of creating self-sustaining environments. Biosphere 2, despite millions in funding and years of preparation, failed catastrophically. Oxygen levels plummeted, carbon dioxide soared, and the carefully designed ecosystem collapsed within months. If we can't maintain a sealed environment in Arizona, how can we possibly create one on the moon? The dream of lunar gardens feeding astronauts remains exactly that, a dream divorced from biological reality. China's social credit system and increasing surveillance state mentality pose unique challenges to international lunar cooperation. How do you collaborate with a nation that might use lunar positioning for mass surveillance? The same technology that tracks lunar rovers could monitor global communications. The dual-use nature of space technology means every collaborative project potentially enhances authoritarian control. Democratic nations face an impossible choice: exclude China and forfeit their resources, or enable technologies that oppress billions. The pharmaceutical industry's focus on profitable treatments over cures reveals a mindset antithetical to space exploration. Lunar missions require solving problems permanently, not managing them indefinitely. But our economic systems reward recurring revenue, not one-time solutions. This fundamental misalignment between capitalism's incentives and space exploration's needs creates systemic barriers. Companies that could develop life support systems make more money selling daily medications than enabling lunar habitation. Here's a calculation that aerospace companies avoid publicizing. The carbon footprint of manufacturing a single lunar mission exceeds some nations' annual emissions. Mining rare earths, refining aluminum, producing fuel. Every step devastates environments. The satellites monitoring climate change rely on rockets that accelerate it. This circular irony becomes harder to justify as climate impacts intensify. How do you sell lunar missions to populations fleeing wildfires and floods? The attention span collapse documented by researchers makes sustained public support for lunar programs impossible. Apollo held America's attention for a decade. Today's news cycle measures relevance in hours. A lunar program requiring 20 years of development would need to survive approximately 7,000 news cycles, each demanding fresh content. The media ecosystem that enabled Apollo's sustained coverage no longer exists. Without public attention, political support evaporates. Quantum entanglement experiments suggest that information might travel faster than light, potentially revolutionizing communication. But this same research reveals the universe's fundamental hostility to maintaining quantum states. The Moon's radiation environment would destroy quantum computers faster than we could build them. The technologies that might make lunar exploration practical are precisely those that can't survive lunar conditions. We're trapped in a technological catch-22. The collapse of international trust makes sharing the sensitive technologies required for lunar missions impossible. Rocket technology is inherently dual-use. Every lunar launcher is a potential ICBM. Guidance systems that navigate to the Moon can deliver warheads. Life support systems that sustain astronauts can enable biological weapons research. Nations guard these technologies jealously, making the international cooperation required for affordable lunar missions politically impossible. Educational systems worldwide have shifted from producing specialists to generalists, undermining the expertise pipeline needed for lunar missions. Apollo-era engineers spent entire careers perfecting single components. Today's students expect broad exposure, multiple career changes, and work-life balance incompatible with obsessive focus. The deep, narrow expertise required for space exploration conflicts with educational trends emphasizing breadth over depth. We're training Renaissance people when we need medieval craftsmen. The rise of synthetic biology promises to solve Earth's problems without leaving it. Why mine the Moon for resources when engineered bacteria can produce them? Why seek new frontiers when we can redesign life itself? The billions required for lunar missions could instead fund research into organisms that eat plastic, produce fuel, or terraform Earth itself. The Moon offers barren rock. Synthetic biology offers infinite possibility. Investment flows toward transformation, not transportation. Social media's algorithmic amplification of negativity makes failure intolerable for public programs. Apollo 1's fire killed 3 astronauts, but the program continued with public support. Today, a single failure would generate millions of posts, trending hashtags, and viral videos demanding cancellation. Risk-averse politicians would immediately defund programs to avoid association with tragedy. The cultural permission to fail forward that enabled Apollo has been replaced by demand for perfect safety. The discovery of Earth's 6th mass extinction event reframes lunar ambitions as escapism from responsibility. While species disappear at rates not seen since the dinosaurs, space agencies plan flags and footprints on dead rocks. The moral weight of preventing extinction on Earth crushes arguments for spreading life to the Moon. How do you justify lunar greenhouses while Earth's rainforests burn? The ethics of exploration collapse when exploration means abandoning crisis. Cryptocurrency's energy consumption reveals uncomfortable truths about technological priorities. Bitcoin mining consumes more electricity than entire nations, producing nothing but digital tokens. This waste dwarfs Apollo's energy budget while contributing nothing to human knowledge or capability. If society accepts such waste for speculation, the efficiency arguments against lunar missions ring hollow. We've revealed that resource allocation follows profit, not purpose. The loneliness epidemic documented by health researchers suggests that human psychology rebels against the isolation required for lunar missions. Depression, anxiety, and suicide rates soar in developed nations despite unprecedented connectivity. Sending humans to the moon's absolute isolation might push fragile psyches past breaking points. The same technologies that enable communication paradoxically increase perceived isolation. Lunar explorers would face psychological challenges that social media has made worse, not better. Genetic engineering's promise to enhance human capability might make unmodified humans obsolete for space exploration. Why send fragile baseline humans when we could engineer radiation-resistant, low-oxygen-adapted post-humans? But this path leads to ethical minefields that make lunar exploration seem simple. Do enhanced humans have the same rights? Can we force modifications on astronauts? The moon might be reachable only by abandoning humanity itself. The insurance industry's climate models show coastal infrastructure failing faster than expected, redirecting trillions from discretionary spending to seawalls and relocations. Miami's slow-motion drowning costs more than a Mars program. New York's flood defenses exceed NASA's budget. The infrastructure bill coming due from decades of climate denial leaves nothing for lunar dreams. We'll spend the next century paying for the previous century's emissions. And speaking of Mars, if you are curious why going to Mars is not an option, check out my video called "This is Why We Would Never Survive on Mars." The link is in the description and pinned on the comments. The discovery of microplastics in human blood reveals how thoroughly we've contaminated Earth's biosphere. These synthetic invaders cross the blood-brain barrier, accumulate in organs, and pass from mother to child. Now imagine the protocols required to prevent contaminating the moon with Earth's plastic pollution. Every tool, every fabric, every seal would need certification as plastic-free. The industrial infrastructure for truly clean manufacturing doesn't exist. We've poisoned ourselves so thoroughly that we can't leave without spreading contamination. Recent studies on astronaut vision reveal a condition called spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome. Fluid shifts in microgravity increase intracranial pressure, potentially causing permanent vision loss. Scott Kelly returned from his year in space with swollen optic nerves and choroidal folds. The moon's low gravity might not prevent this damage. We could be creating a generation of blind lunar explorers, unable to see the very world they've sacrificed their sight to reach. The irony is too cruel for recruitment posters. The collapse of rare Earth supply chains during recent geopolitical tensions exposed our technological fragility. When China restricted exports, entire industries ground to halt. Lunar missions require exotic materials: indium for solar panels, hafnium for control rods, beryllium for structural components. Each material represents a potential choke point where hostile nations could strangle lunar ambitions. We've built a technological civilization too complex for the political world that must sustain it. Here's what defense contractors understand but won't say publicly. The militarization of space makes civilian lunar missions impossible. Every lunar technology has weapons applications. Mass drivers for launching cargo become kinetic bombardment systems. Nuclear reactors for bases enable nuclear weapons. Communication systems become surveillance networks. The dual-use nature means military classification restricts sharing, international cooperation becomes espionage risk, and peaceful exploration provides cover for weapons development. The moon is already a battlefield. We just haven't started shooting yet. The metabolic research on hibernation reveals why science fiction's solution to long space journeys remains fantasy. Hibernating animals don't just sleep, they undergo profound physiological changes that would be fatal to humans. Our large brains consume too much energy to survive metabolic suppression. The cellular damage from extended hibernation would age astronauts decades in months. The shortcut to surviving lunar missions through suspended animation leads nowhere. We're trapped in real time, with all its resource demands and psychological challenges. Ocean acidification from carbon absorption threatens the base of Earth's food chain, making lunar agriculture research seem obscenely misplaced. While we dream of growing potatoes on the moon, phytoplankton that produce half our oxygen face extinction, the expertise needed for closed-loop lunar life support could save Earth's oceans, but funding flows toward hypothetical lunar greenhouses instead of actual terrestrial ecosystems. We're planning dinner parties on the moon while Earth's kitchen burns. The social fragmentation accelerated by pandemic isolation revealed humanity's psychological fragility. Suicide rates soared, mental health systems collapsed, and social bonds shattered under far less isolation than lunar missions demand. The astronauts we'd send to the moon would need unprecedented psychological resilience precisely when society produces increasingly fragile individuals. Selection criteria from the Apollo era would eliminate most modern candidates. We've become too psychologically dependent on constant connection to tolerate lunar isolation. Artificial intelligence's electricity consumption trajectory makes lunar missions energetically impossible. Training a single large language model consumes as much power as thousands of homes. The AI systems needed for autonomous lunar operations would require nuclear reactors just for computation. Every watt spent on AI is a watt not available for life support. The future we're building consumes too much power to leave Earth. We're prisoners of our own computational complexity. The breakdown of international scientific publishing reveals how thoroughly competition has replaced cooperation. Research that once flowed freely now hides behind paywalls, classification stamps, and corporate secrets. Chinese lunar research remains opaque, Russian contributions get sanctioned, and American innovations become trade secrets. The free exchange of knowledge that enabled Apollo has been replaced by information hoarding that makes collaborative lunar missions impossible. We've built walls around the very knowledge needed to escape Earth. Deepening wealth inequality creates political dynamics that preclude lunar investment. Billionaires funding vanity space projects generate backlash against all space spending. How do you justify lunar bases to populations living in tent cities? The optics of space exploration become politically toxic when contrasted with terrestrial suffering. Every lunar mission proposal becomes ammunition for populist politicians denouncing elite escapism. The wealthy poison the well of public support through their orbital joyrides. The discovery of forever chemicals in rainwater worldwide demonstrates our inability to contain technological consequences. PFAS compounds now contaminate every water source on Earth, from Arctic snow to tropical rainfall. These chemicals persist for thousands of years, accumulating in living tissue. The same industrial processes that would build lunar infrastructure spread these poisons. We can't manage our waste products on Earth. The moon would become another contamination site. Our chemical legacy already extends beyond our planet through spacecraft contamination. Quantum computing's fragility reveals fundamental limits on advanced technology in space. Quantum states decohere from the slightest vibration, temperature change, or electromagnetic interference. The moon's temperature swings of 300 degrees, micrometeorite impacts, and radiation environment would destroy quantum computers instantly. The advanced computing needed for autonomous lunar operations can't survive lunar conditions. We're developing technologies too delicate for the environments where we need them most. The failure of carbon capture technology exposes our inability to engineer planetary-scale solutions. Despite billions invested, we can't efficiently remove carbon from Earth's atmosphere. The terraforming dreams that justify lunar bases require orders of magnitude more complex atmospheric engineering. If we can't manage Earth's atmosphere with unlimited resources and perfect conditions, lunar atmospheric creation remains pure fantasy. Reality has vetoed our atmospheric ambitions. The rise of authoritarian surveillance technology makes international space cooperation a human rights nightmare. Facial recognition, gait analysis, and behavioral prediction algorithms developed for space missions get deployed against dissidents. Every technology shared for lunar exploration enhances oppression capabilities. Democratic nations face an impossible choice: advance space exploration by empowering authoritarians, or abandon the moon to preserve human freedom. The moon becomes complicit in Earth's oppression. Recent discoveries about tardigrades surviving space exposure created false hope about biological adaptability. Yes, these microscopic animals survived vacuum, radiation, and temperature extremes, but they did so through cryptobiosis, essentially dying temporarily. They didn't thrive or reproduce, they merely endured. The lesson isn't that life adapts to space, but that survival and living are fundamentally different. Lunar colonists might survive, but could they truly live? Biology votes no. The neurological impacts of cosmic radiation exposure reveal horrors that space agencies desperately minimize. Recent studies on mice exposed to cosmic ray doses equivalent to a Mars mission showed severe cognitive decline, memory loss, and behavioral changes resembling dementia. The moon offers no magnetic field protection, meaning colonists would experience similar neural degradation. We're not just risking cancer, we're risking our minds. The first lunar colonists might return as shadows of themselves, their memories and personalities erased by invisible particles. Financial forensics of space industry contracts exposes systematic corruption that makes lunar missions unaffordable. Boeing charged NASA $500 for simple washers, $10,000 for toilet seats. Cost-plus contracts incentivize delays and overruns. The SLS program has consumed enough money to fund dozens of robotic missions, yet delivered a single test flight. This isn't incompetence, it's a system designed to extract maximum profit from minimal progress. The moon remains unreachable because reaching it would end the gravy train. The collapse of global phosphorus supplies presents an existential threat that makes lunar exploration morally indefensible. Phosphorus is essential for all life, irreplaceable in agriculture, and running out. Morocco controls 70% of remaining reserves. Wars over phosphorus will make oil conflicts seem quaint. Yet lunar mission planning ignores this looming catastrophe, proposing to spend billions reaching barren rock while Earth faces agricultural collapse. The chemistry of survival trumps the romance of exploration. Here's what materials scientists won't admit publicly. We've lost the ability to manufacture many Apollo-era materials. Environmental regulations banned the chemicals, specialized facilities closed, and institutional knowledge vanished. The ablative heat shields that protected Apollo capsules required asbestos-based materials now illegal worldwide. Modern substitutes perform worse at higher cost. Progress isn't always forward. Sometimes we lose capabilities we can't recover. The moon recedes as our materials science regresses. The methane emissions from thawing permafrost create a feedback loop that makes climate change unstoppable. Siberian craters release methane plumes visible from space. Each degree of warming releases more methane, causing more warming. We've triggered a planetary state change that will consume all resources for adaptation. Lunar missions become unconscionable when we need every dollar, every brilliant mind, every ounce of effort to manage Earth's transformation. The moon is a luxury for a stable planet we no longer inhabit. Advances in brain-computer interfaces suggest a future where physical exploration becomes obsolete. Why risk death on the moon when you can experience perfect neural simulation? Neuralink and similar technologies promise direct sensory input indistinguishable from reality. The generation raised on virtual experiences might find actual lunar exploration primitive, like choosing to walk when you could teleport. Technology doesn't enable exploration, It replaces the need for it. The discovery of antibiotic resistance genes in Antarctic ice cores proves that human contamination reaches Earth's most remote locations. These genes, from human waste, now circulate in ecosystems that never encountered humans. The Moon's contamination wouldn't be theoretical, it's inevitable. Every boot print would deposit Earth microbes, forever altering lunar chemistry. We've proven incapable of exploration without contamination. Planetary protection isn't just protocol, it's an admission of our infectious nature. Social credit systems spreading globally create populations psychologically unsuited for lunar exploration. These systems reward conformity, punish risk-taking, and create citizens optimized for compliance. Lunar missions require individuals willing to challenge authority, take calculated risks, and think independently. We're engineering societies that produce the opposite. The explorer personality becomes extinct through systematic selection against it. Brave, new worlds require brave people we're systematically eliminating. The energy return on investment for lunar missions approaches zero when honestly calculated. Every joule spent reaching the Moon could generate multiple joules invested in terrestrial renewable energy. Solar panels in Earth's deserts outperform hypothetical lunar power stations when transmission losses are included. The thermodynamics of space exploration make it an energy sink, not source. Physics itself argues against leaving Earth. We're fighting fundamental equations that always win. Recent revelations about astronaut DNA damage show that space permanently alters human genetics. Telomeres lengthen, then rapidly shorten, chromosomes invert, and gene expression changes persist years after return. These aren't temporary adjustments, they're permanent rewrites of human code. Lunar colonists wouldn't just visit another world, they'd become another species. The ethical implications of intentionally creating genetically altered humans through environmental exposure remain unexplored. We're proposing speciation without consent. The collapse of science funding globally reflects priorities incompatible with lunar ambitions. Basic research budgets shrink while military spending soars. Universities eliminate tenure, forcing researchers into short-term thinking. The patient capital needed for lunar missions, investments with 20-year horizons, no longer exists. Quarterly earnings reports drive decision-making. The Moon requires cathedral thinking in an era of strip mall planning. Our economic timeframes have contracted below the threshold for great achievements. Microplastic contamination in the food chain means lunar food production would import Earth's pollution. Every seed carries plastic particles. Hydroponic systems concentrate contaminants. The clean slate promised by lunar agriculture is fantasy. We transplant our contamination along with our crops. The dream of pure lunar environment dies in the reality of our thoroughly poisoned biology. We can't escape ourselves, even on another world. The psychological concept of learned helplessness explains public apathy toward space exploration. Decades of broken promises, lunar bases by 1980, Mars by 2000, asteroid mining by 2020, created cynicism. Each failed prediction reduces belief in the next promise. The public has learned that space futures never arrive. This psychological vaccination against hope might be space exploration's greatest barrier. We've cried wolf about the Moon so often that genuine efforts face insurmountable skepticism. Fusion power's persistent failure mirrors lunar exploration's trajectory. Both represent technologies perpetually 20 years away. Both consume billions in research yielding incremental progress. Both promise transformation while delivering disappointment. The parallel suggests systemic inability to achieve breakthrough technologies in modern society. We've become experts at refinement, not revolution. The Moon and fusion remain forever out of reach because reaching them requires capabilities we've lost. The rise of biosecurity concerns makes international cooperation on life support systems impossible. COVID demonstrated how quickly biological research becomes weaponized politically. Sharing life support technology means sharing bioweapon capability. Air recycling systems that sustain lunar bases could spread engineered pathogens. Water purification technology enables biological warfare. Every component of lunar life support has dual-use potential that security states won't share. Cooperation dies in the paranoia of potential misuse. The quantum vacuum fluctuations near massive bodies reveal a universe actively hostile to stability. The Casimir effect demonstrates that empty space seethes with virtual particles that exert real pressure. On the Moon, without atmospheric pressure to counterbalance, these quantum forces could accelerate material degradation in ways we don't fully understand. Seals might fail faster, metals could develop unexpected fatigue, and the very fabric of our technology might unravel at the quantum level. We're fighting not just the Moon's environment, but the fundamental nature of space-time itself. Recent analysis of Apollo lunar samples using modern techniques revealed shocking contamination levels from Earth. Despite heroic efforts at cleanliness, every sample contains traces of terrestrial materials. The clean rooms weren't clean enough. The protocols failed. If we couldn't keep Earth out of sample containers, how could we keep it out of lunar habitats? The contamination problem runs deeper than technology. It's embedded in the impossibility of perfect isolation. The Moon's pristine environment died the moment we touched it. The demographic collapse in technical fields presents an insurmountable expertise crisis. Aerospace engineering enrollment has dropped 70% since Apollo. The average age of spacecraft designers approaches retirement. Young talent flows to AI, biotech, and finance. The specialized knowledge required for lunar missions exists in aging brains that retire faster than they can train replacements. We're watching the human infrastructure for space exploration literally die off. By the time we decide to return to the Moon, everyone who knows how will be gone. Here's a calculation that venture capitalists avoid. The total addressable market for lunar products is essentially zero. Helium-3 for fusion reactors that don't exist. Water for missions that aren't funded. Rare minerals that cost more to retrieve than their Earth value. The business case for lunar development requires customers that don't exist for products we can't deliver. Investment flows toward profitable delusions, not actual capabilities. The Moon's economy is a pyramid scheme with no foundation. The discovery of quantum biology in photosynthesis and navigation suggests life depends on quantum coherence that space radiation destroys. Birds navigate using quantum entanglement in specialized proteins. Plants convert sunlight through quantum tunneling. These delicate quantum processes, essential for Earth life, would collapse in the Moon's radiation environment. We might be quantum creatures incapable of surviving where quantum states can't persist. Biology's deepest mechanisms vote against lunar colonization. Climate refugee movements preview the political impossibility of funding lunar missions. When millions flee rising seas and failing crops, space budgets become politically radioactive. How do you justify lunar habitats while humans lack terrestrial homes? The moral mathematics doom any politician supporting space over suffering. Every climate disaster strengthens the argument against exploration. The Moon becomes unreachable not through technical failure but through ethical impossibility. We can't leave Earth while Earth needs us. The attention economy's dopamine optimization makes sustained focus impossible. Apollo required millions of person-hours of concentrated effort. Today's workers check phones every 6 minutes, fragment attention across multiple screens, and lose deep focus capability. The neurological rewiring from constant stimulation creates brains incapable of the sustained concentration space missions demand. We've engineered a species too distracted to reach the Moon. Digital addiction succeeded where gravity failed. It trapped us on Earth. Synthetic biology's potential to create self-replicating organisms presents an existential risk that makes planetary protection paramount. One escaped engineered microbe on the Moon could evolve in unpredictable ways. Without Earth's complex ecosystem to provide competition and control, synthetic organisms might undergo rapid evolution. We could accidentally create lunar life forms that make human presence impossible. The technology that might enable lunar survival could also guarantee lunar exile. Every solution creates new problems. The collapse of trust in institutions extends to space agencies themselves. NASA's reputation, once unassailable, now faces constant scrutiny. Every delay reinforces narratives of incompetence. Every cost overrun fuels conspiracy theories. The social license that enabled Apollo evaporated in decades of broken promises. Public faith, once lost, might be irrecoverable. The Moon isn't just technically distant, it's psychologically unreachable for populations that no longer believe in their institutions' capabilities. Recent discoveries about the role of Earth's magnetic field in protecting DNA suggest humans are fundamentally Earth-adapted. Our cells evolved repair mechanisms calibrated to Earth's specific radiation environment. The Moon's exposure levels don't just damage DNA, they overwhelm repair systems evolved over billions of years. We're not generic life forms capable of adapting anywhere. We're Earth life, shaped by Earth conditions, sustainable only on Earth. The Moon represents an environment we're evolutionarily forbidden from inhabiting. The rise of automated warfare makes space assets primary military targets. Any lunar base would be defenseless against kinetic strikes, laser weapons, or cyber attacks. The same visibility that makes the Moon attractive for astronomy makes it vulnerable to attack. Nations developing lunar capabilities paint targets on their assets. The militarization of space ensures that civilian lunar missions become military liabilities. Peace on Earth is prerequisite for exploration beyond it, and peace seems increasingly impossible. Soil depletion worldwide redirects agricultural research from lunar farming to Earth survival. Topsoil loss threatens food security within decades. The expertise needed for closed-loop lunar agriculture must focus on preventing terrestrial famine. Every agronomist working on lunar potatoes is one not saving Earth's breadbaskets. The technical overlap between lunar and terrestrial agriculture makes choosing the Moon over Earth morally indefensible. We can't afford to split our efforts when survival is at stake. The psychological phenomenon of solastalgia, distress caused by environmental change, reveals humanity's deep connection to Earth environments. Astronauts report profound homesickness, not for people, but for nature itself. The absence of weather, seasons, and biological rhythms causes psychological damage we're only beginning to understand. Lunar colonists would face permanent solastalgia, forever separated from the environmental cues that regulate human psychology. Mental health on the Moon might be impossible by definition. Financial derivatives and complex instruments have disconnected money from physical reality. The same mechanisms that crashed economies in 2008 now dominate space funding. Companies raise billions on promises, not products. Stock prices reflect speculation, not capability. The financial engineering that was supposed to enable private space development instead created bubbles that burst before reaching orbit. Real lunar missions require real resources, not financial fiction. The Moon remains unreachable because we've replaced engineering with accounting. The discovery of horizontal gene transfer in extremophiles suggests contamination risks beyond our models. Organisms don't just evolve, they share genetic material across species boundaries. Earth microbes on the Moon might incorporate lunar chemistry in unpredictable ways. We could create hybrid organisms adapted to neither world, capable of destroying both. The biological barriers we assume protect separate environments prove permeable. Contamination isn't just about bringing Earth life to the Moon, it's about creating new forms of life we can't control. If you made this far, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up. And if you enjoyed this video, I am sure you will love this other one at the left side of the screen. Why anyone who goes to Mars will never return to Earth. Discover why Mars colonists will face one-way trips due to the rocket equation, the lack of infrastructure, and the staggering costs of return missions. See you there.